Hey up and welcome to another episode of Last Cast. Today you join us doing something a bit different and what's going to be probably the first episode in a little series we're going to do, where I personally will go to different club waters and fish loads of different venues, a real variety, and just basically run through my approach. There'll be no sort of tutorial aspect, it'll just be me approaching a brand new venue that I've never seen before and running you through sort of my plan of attack and what I'm going to do. So that looked at, we're here today on a Slaithwaite water just outside Shepley. It's called Push Dam. Really nice little venue. Like I say, know nothing about it. I've seen a couple of people catch one or two fish here, so I know there's a good head of silverfish and a good mixture of fish in here as well. So that's pretty much all I know. I don't know the depths or what methods and rigs have worked here or anything like that. So that's why I've got a ton of gear set up around me. So with that said, what I'm going to do on this peg, well, first of all, let's look at the peg that I've chosen. Today I've picked the shallowest peg on the lake, or what I think will be the shallowest. It's the furthest away from the dam wall, so hopefully the depths will be a bit shallower here, and with the warm weather, it's always good to look for shallow water this time of year. So we've set ourselves up on a nice peg here, quite an open peg. I had to do a bit of gardening just to get the gear in and stuff like that, but I'm quite happy with the peg. Got plenty of open water to go at, and that's something that I always look for on a new venue. Try and get somewhere where we've got loads of different options to fish. So with here I've got a good couple of edge lines, loads of open water in front of me, and like I say, plenty of options to go at. So with that in mind, I'll run you through what I've decided to do. Today we're going to look at both pole fishing and a bit of rod and line fishing as well. So I'll run you through the rod and line. Basically, it's dead simple, waggler and maggot is what I'm going for. So I'm going to fish this at probably around 20 metres or so. Dead simple and nice light gear for roach and whatever we can catch. I don't think there's any snags in here, so there's no point fishing heavy. So I've gone for the usual 13-foot Garbolino Waggler rod, really nice and light, 301 size. 3012 size Daywood TDM loaded with 3 pound TDR reel line. Again, dead simple, nice and light, and perfect for chucking little wagglers like we're going to do today. In terms of the rig, it's quite far up is the float, but I'll try and shuffle the rod out the way. We've just got a Drennan Stillwater Blue up there in a 1.6 gram, nice cane tip. Gone for the yellow colour because it's dark water out there, so I'll be able to see it nicely, and I've just got that locked on there with a bulk. I've plumbed this up at dead depth to start with, and then I'm just going to fish through the water and shallow it up as bites go along. Down the line I've got 3 number 9 shot and a little swivel. The reason why I've gone for a swivel on this rig is because it looks like there's a lot of fish in here, and I expect to be in and out quite a bit with missed bites. I've seen a lot of small fish tops, so if you know that you're going to catch a lot of fish or get a lot of bites, always incorporate a little mini match swivel in there. It's equivalent to about a number 10 shot. Hook length wise is 093 Drennan Suplex fluorocarbon down to size 18B 560. Usual kind of stuff, nice and light, and a slightly bigger hook than I'd usually go for, like I say, because it looks like there's quite a few fish in here. So all I'm going to do is pretty much start with that while my ground bait lines on the pole settle, and just ping maggots and just see and go from there. Let the ground bait line settle for a good half hour, and then we'll progress on to those. But we'll look at what I'm going to do on the pole next. Like I said, I'm going to fish two lines. I might put in a third line down the edge with chopworm and caster later on, but we'll see how the session goes. But predominantly it's going to be 2 lines, a long and a short line. 5 metres I'm going to fish for roach, and then at 11.5 metres I'm going to fish for skimmers and better quality fish. So we'll look at the different ground bait mixes that I've gone with down those routes. 11.5 metres I've gone for more of a skimmer mix. As you can see, I've mixed the balls up next to me, and that's basically equal parts of black swim stim, Census Magic, and equally Census Lake. So a nice classic skimmer mix, a little bit of fish meal in there just in case the skimmers turn sort of accustomed to it if people feed pellets here, but not too much, mainly a natural mix. So nice and inert, quite heavily wetted because I want that to go down and stay down for about an hour and a half before I fish it. So I'll feed 6 balls on that line. I've loaded it with micro pellets, a few casters and a load of dead maggots as well. Again, typically inert baits for skimmers and something that I've got confidence in from other venues, natural venues where I fish. So that's the ground bait line long at 11.5 metres. Rigs for that I've set up 2. As usual, a heavier rig and a lighter rig. So I'll start from the top end with these. Sort of my typical skimmer rigs. Double 4 elastic in the top end of both, 013 main lines, got back shot on both rigs, and they both incorporate a Census Jean-Francois float, one in a 0.6, one in a 0.8. The 0.6 I'm going to fish about 2 inches off the deck because with it being warm, some better roach might sit above the ground bait and feed, and the 0.8 nice and positive, nailed to the deck about 1.5 inches over. Shotting patterns are pretty much the same on both, except a bit more positive on the 0.8 rig, so a bulk and 3 droppers on that. droppers being number 10, so nice and positive. And on the lighter rig, bulk a bit further away and 4 number 10 droppers. Hook lengths are exactly the same, 095 Drennan Suplex fluorocarbon, and they've both got Colmic N957s on there, an 18 on the heavier rig and a 20 on the lighter rig. Puller bungs as well. Again, if you don't know what you're going to hook, it's worth having them on a puller kit because you can get anything you hook out. So if we get tench or F1s or whatever, we'll be able to get them out on those rigs. So that's my ground bait line, and like I say, I'm going to leave that for probably a good couple of hours before I go on it. So feed it nice and positive, like I say. The roach line, I've set up 4 rigs for that, but I'm only going to really start with 2. I'll cover the others if the fish come off bottom and if I decide to loose feed. But the crux of that line is going to be at 5 metres at the bottom of the shelf, in about sort of what must be 6.5, 7 foot of water. Exactly the same principle as what I've done on the long line, a positive rig and a lighter rig, but because it's roach fishing, the positive rig, what I've done is set it very positive, and the light rig is more of a strung out pattern. So on the heavier rig, number 6 elastic in the top end, and a Sensus SA2 pencil style float, stuff that I use for bread punch fishing, so it'll set nice and quick. 0.8, so it'll go right down and, like I say, fish immediately. There's a lot of small fish in that sort of area of the peg that I want to be able to bomb a bait through them, so that's my thinking there. Both rigs have an 093 Drennan Suplex main line, before I forget, and then the lighter rig, which I'm going to fish through the water, number 4 elastic, and then more of a classic sort of through the water style Sensus float, can't remember the name of it. Wire stem, again, both the floats back shotted with a little number 11. Then down to the shotting of each. On the through the water rig, number 11 spaced all the way through to the hook length. Hook length 075 Drennan Suplex fluorocarbon to a 20 B511, so nice and light. And then my heavier rig, all I've done is bulk the shot down there and incorporated 2 droppers, number 10s, so nice and positive, and then a short 5-inch hook length, same material, but to an 18 B511. Like I say, keeping stuff dead simple there. In terms of what I'm going to feed on that line, again, I've mixed up a different ground bait mix there, equal parts of Dynamite Silver X Roach, Frenzied Hempseed Black and Sensus Gross Gardon. So again, a mix that I've got confidence in. I know it works for roach and it's something I'm happy with. One thing to note, I've got both lines on a really dark mix because it's a safe bet. You don't always know if fish will respond to a light mix, but a dark mix 99% of the time works, so that's what I've gone for. And with that, I've just loaded it with casters, a lot of hemp seed, and then the odd live pinky, because I want those balls to break up nice and quick on that short line, be really nice and active and get plenty of roach into the peg. Obviously roach like a bit of activity in the swim, so hence the high hemp content. And like I say, that's pretty much it. The edge line we'll cover if we look at it and I decide to fish it, and likewise if I decide to loose feed a few casters shallow short, then I'll run over the rigs that we're going to use there. But that's the crux of what I'm going to do today. So like I say, it's going to be 6 balls on the long line, 2 on the short line for roach, and start on the Waggler, and we'll just see how the session progresses from there. So I'll turn around on the box now, get the peg fed, and we'll start fishing. So it's now time to kick off the session and feed the peg. So first thing I'm going to do is just ping a few maggots out over my Waggler line, just to get an idea of where I'm going to be fishing for that. And I'm going to put in 2 balls of ground bait, squeezed fairly tight, like I say, because it's got the pinkies in it, so they'll break it up on the way down. I'm going to feed this on that short line. Luckily, because it's very flat on the bottom there, I don't have to feed it past my marker or anything like that. And to make life easy as well for me, I've used the same far bank marker for my long line as my short line. Again, the crux of that is the fact that it's like a table out there, it's absolutely flat, so I don't need to plumb up left or right. Let's get the second ball as well for this. And one thing that's worth noting as well is I'm probably going to top this line up as the day goes on, so according to bites, and just try and push the fish down really. So that's the short line fed. So it's now time to put the 6 balls in on the long line. Again, each time I'm coming back, I'm just going to ping a few maggots out and try and just get that Waggler line started before I start fishing it. Again, going to feed in a very general area for that. And what I don't think we'll do, we won't show you us cupping all 6 balls in, but like I say, you get the idea from just a couple. I'll take my time, make sure they bang on the marker. The other thing, with the depth being about 7.5 foot, I've made the balls so they just about fit in the cup again. Something I've covered before. When you turn the pot over, a little tap and it stops the ball rolling out of the cup and spinning off. Just reaching my marker, lining up with the tree on the far bank. You can see there, ball hangs in the cup, a little tap and it comes straight out. So what I'll do now is crack on and feed another 5 of those balls, and then we'll start fishing on the Waggler. Right, so now I've fed my ground bait lines. Every time I've come back, I've pinged about 5 or 6 maggots over that Waggler line. So we'll have a chuck now, little red maggot on the hook to start with, see if we can get a bite. The same way that I do with pellet waggler fishing, I'm going to try and get into a rhythm of feeding 4 or 5 before I go out, and then casting over the top of them. And I've made sure my float's just heavy enough to cast past my feed, and it's just a case of watching and waiting with it. Again, one thing, if I'm getting lots of bites on the drop, either I'll shallow up or I'll start using that glow tip antenna floating the same size. So it just allows you to read the fall of the maggot a little bit better because of the banding on the antenna. But we'll start with this and see how it goes. That looks like a bite. Missed that one, there's a bit of an indication on the float there. Just check the state of the maggot. Yeah, it should be good to go for another one. So same again, 3 or 4 maggots. Then cast over the top. Again, checking the line and stopping the float before it lands, just making sure that, especially when you're fishing quite deep like that, that you're strung out shot, all landing a nice line behind the float and you're presenting it correctly. Again, one thing, because it looks like there's quite a few fish in here, I'm not too fussed about feeding too accurately. A nice sort of area, about the size of a snooker table, something like that, is what I'm after, just trying to get a fish in a general area. Just seeing one top right behind the float, so it might be that I'm fishing too deep already, but crucially it's just a case of sussing that out on the day. Again, what I'll do on a lot of new venues to me is I'll start off fishing to the deck and then try and work out how high up in the water I can catch the fish. Again, fishing a nice light 3-pound mainline means that you can cut through the surface tension a lot easier, especially on mill ponds like this, which is really important for keeping your float in one place. One thing that I haven't run through just yet is my bait choice as well for today. You can see from the side tray I've got loads of different options on there, but they all revolve around natural baits. So I've got hemp, casters, that's a biting first fish of the session. Hemp, casters, a few pinkies, it's just dropped off as that one. And worms as well, and dead maggots. I've got a few pellets like I mentioned, but those are just primarily for a feed bait on the skimmer line, just in case that's what the fish want. But like I say, I've gone down what I know to be a safe bet, and that's the crux of when you go to a new venue. Stick to the methods that you know work on other venues that are comparable, and then you've always got a reference point to start with. Looks like there's a fish on there, and there is. Nice little roach to start off the session. Again, he's taken that well down, so you could see the float just slowly moving right to left there. Just hooked on the inside of the mouth. And at least we're off the mark now. So there you go, roach only about an ounce or so. We'll get him popped in the net and at least we're off the mark. But straight away with that fish, I'm going to shallow up. Clearly fishing through the water on that waggler and maggot to full depth isn't the way to go. I reckon it's going to be a case of fishing half depth or less. So I'll just shallow this rig up now and then we'll get back out there and hopefully have a few more. Right, so I've just shallowed up now from what was about 7.5 foot to about 3.5, so just under half depth. I'm going to see if I can get bites there. So both sort of, well, I might have had 3 bites really. All the indications I've had seem to be in that probably top 4 feet of water. So all I've got down the line now is just 2 number 9s above that swivel. Spaced out equally, you can see fish swirling all the time as well. And I think that's the depth that I'm going to work with today. There you go, lift biting a fish on straight away. As soon as I've changed that depth, when that float's pretty much reached, well, it's just dropped off, might have to put a fresh hook length on. When that's reached pretty much just shy of full depth there, we've had a lift biting an indication, so I know that the fish are somewhere in about 3 to 2 foot of depth out there. Might require a bit of a firmer strike, but it could well be that hook's a bit blunt. Like I say, I'm going to work with this for the first sort of half an hour to an hour before I look on those ground bait lines. Again, we're fishing decent droppers. I can see every indication on that float. That was a little bite then as well. So when there's a lot of fish, it's something else to take away from this video is if there's a lot of fish in your peg, very often, unless they're very finicky like on canals, try fishing heavier droppers. Just means that you get more positive bites and you can hit more of them. Another bite. I definitely might have to put on a new hook length. There's plenty of fish out there. Hopefully when they start feeding a bit more aggressively, I'll be able to hit a few more bites as well. Again, the other little thing as well when it comes to waggler fishing, what I always prefer to do, pick the weight of your float after you've decided how far out you can fish according to your catapult. So to retain the same distance every time, what I like to do is basically fish at the maximum range of the catapult. So I'll establish that at the start, ping a few maggots out, work out how far out I'm going to fish or can fish in the given conditions with the catapult, and then I'll pick a heavy enough float to suit. It's fish topping all the time, right where I'm feeding. Because it's roach fishing as well, something that I'm going to try today is just fishing past the feed occasionally. A lot of venues that I fish, when it comes to roach fishing, rather than in the middle of your feed, just past it can often nick the better fish, especially on canals and stuff like that. So it's little things like that to try on these new venues. Some places the bigger roach or bigger fish might sit right on top of your feed. Other places where the water's a bit clearer or say they see a lot of pressure, the bigger fish will just be past the feed. So when you go to a new venue, it's worth just trying things like that out just to see what works. Little indication there. I've been a bit finicky today. I think it'll be a case of just keep the maggots going in and try and get them to build a bit of confidence. And I think also a sharper hook like a hook is probably required. Right, so a quick update now. We're 15 minutes into the session. We've had quite a few bites on the waggler and 1 fish. But what I've already done is changed depth twice. I've gone pretty shallow, about 3 foot, and I think that's a bit too shallow, so I've gone back to about 4 foot now and then changed the hook down for a fresh one in a size 20. I think the fish are a bit cagey, so a smaller hook should offer a bit better presentation. I've also spaced the shotting out a little bit more, so I'm fishing probably about 11 inches between each shot rather than what I was doing before, which was about 8. So again, just slowing the fall down and making the bait come across a bit more natural. Again, it's little changes like that, especially on natural venues, that can make a massive difference at the end of the day. So then the other variable with fishing a waggler like this is sussing out how much they want to be fed. Little indication there. There's quite a few fish in the peg, so I think what I'm going to do is try and feed about 3 or 4 maggots every single chuck, maybe twice a chuck, and just see if that's what they want. You can see the float's moving all the time, so I know there's fish there. The other thing that's apparent, I've seen quite a few fish top close in as well at about 5 metres, so it might be an option there that I could catch shallow. If I'm missing a lot of bites on the waggler, I could fish a pull shallow short, and like I said earlier, I've got a couple of rigs for that just in case. Little indications on the float all the time. I think there are quite a few small fish in the peg, so that's again one of the reasons why it's worth covering your options of fishing both through the water and fishing positive with ground bait. Usually you fish more positive with ground bait, you can sort out the bigger fish more easily. Little indication straight away on the drop. It's like the fish are just sort of testing the maggot. Another little indication there, so I might have to dot this float down to an absolute pimple. The fish are being incredibly finicky. Lots of bites all the time. So I'm going to make another little adjustment to the rig and just dot it down a little bit more. I think I've definitely got the shotting pattern and the depth right, because I'm getting bites every single chuck. I think it's just a case of the fish building their confidence and making sure they keep the bait down when they do take it. Just going to put another number 10 on that. That should dot the float down to an absolute pimple, so hopefully it'll offer a little bit less resistance to the fish and they'll take the bait with more confidence. And as expected, if there's that many roach out there long that over that short ground bait line, we should get plenty of bites there as well. Bite straight away. Like I say, I'm already fairly happy with what's going on so far in the session. At least we've got bites and fish in front of us. So now it's just going to be a case of another bite there, fine tuning and trying to keep the fish feeding. And that maggot's had it. Again, the other thing as well, I haven't spent as long loose feeding as I'd have liked on some venues. Sometimes you have to loose feed for a good half hour or an hour to get the silverfish up and competing confidently, whereas here pretty much fed it for about 5 minutes before we've gone on it. But at least I'm confident that we've got one line now that's got a few fish on it. So I'll keep feeding it. There we go, that's a fish on. Again, that was probably about 6 feet short of the fed area, that, but it feels like a better roach, this. It's a really good stamp fish, is that. You can see probably about 3 ounces, that one, and those are what we're after on the Waggler if we can catch them. Again, little changes like that, and we've been rewarded fairly quickly with a fish. So I'll just nick the hook out of him and then we'll get him popped in the keep net. There we go. One thing as well to note here, before I forget, again, it's stuff that's worth mentioning on these club waters that we're fishing. There's little things in the rules. Here, because there's a pond lining, you're not allowed to put any bank sticks in or keep nets unless they're coming straight off your seat box. It's something just to note that if anyone watching does give it a go here when they've got a Slaithwaite book. So all the while I'm keeping an eye on my watch, just to give myself an idea of when I can go on that ground bait line short. See, that float's dotted right down now. So I might even put a bit of bristle grease on that just to keep it above the surface. Right, so I've just put a bit of bristle grease on the float just to keep it above the surface tension. So I'm just making sure I'm minimising the resistance on any bites that we do get, because the fish are very finicky. One other thing to notice that's already interesting is a lot of the fish that I've caught have all been hooked in the bottom lips, as if they're taking the bait and then swimming up in the water column. Like that. Getting bites pretty much within the first sort of 10 inches of the fall of the bait. Another good stamp roach this, I'll just swing him. If we start getting a couple of these every minute, we'll soon build a weight. Again, hook's right in the bottom lip as you can see there. Another nice roach, couple of ounces. There's fish swirling out right over the top of where I'm feeding as well. Again, I'm probably going to give this another 5 or 10 minutes before I ever go on that short pole line, just to see what's there. Straight away in indications as the maggot's just starting its fall. Again, when it's reached sort of 2-3 foot, it seems to be that there's no fish there. So it's very similar to sort of pellet waggler fishing this. You're looking for bites within the top couple of inches of the water column. See that fish swirl as soon as the maggots hit the surface. I think it could be down to the fact that there's a lot of stuff falling off the trees here, so the fish are used to feeding right off the top. So they react as soon as there's any noise on the water. You can see that they're topping as soon as those maggots hit. Biting another fish on. Again, slightly smaller stamp fish, but they're all in immaculate condition. So you can see now getting much more positive bites and actually hitting a few as well. Might do as well here is just nip that barb down on the hook just for speed. Fish about an ounce there. Just missed the keep net and pop him in. But like I say already, little changes have made a massive difference to our catch rate. Dotting that float down, changing the depth, and just fishing with a little bit more finesse. We're starting to connect with a few fish. And again, a lot of it on these venues is sussing out how the fish are actually feeding on the day, or the target species that you're after. Like it seems today that the fish or the roach are taking stuff pretty much right off the surface. So I don't need to worry about overfeeding them. It's just a case of making sure that when my maggot goes in, it goes in pretty much straight after the loose feed. You can see him swirling on the surface again. Pulled out of that one that time. Much more positive bites. They're actually holding on to the maggot now. So what I think I'll do is I'll crack on with this for the next sort of 10-15 minutes, then be about 45 minutes from the start of the session, and we'll have a go on that short line with the roach ground bait at 5 metres. And all the while we'll keep feeding this Waggler line and just dropping on it another fish on straight away. Again, they're taking the maggot much further down now, so they're definitely getting more aggressive on the feed. Again, an option that I always have as well is switching to hemp and castor on this line, but like I say, we'll crack on with this now, try and get a few more roach in the net, and then we'll have a look on that 5 metre line. Right, so I'm going to have one more chuck on the Waggler now, because I'm fairly happy I've got this sussed. It's clear that the fish are pretty much taking stuff as soon as it hits the water, and there's loads of fish in the peg, but so we've hit that 45-minute mark now, and I've seen a load of movement over that short line at 5 metres. So what I'm going to do is take what I've learnt on the Waggler here and possibly apply it to the short line and loose feed over the top of that and fish really shallow. I should be able to hit more bites, because like I say, the fish are definitely there and they're responding to loose feed. I'll just give it another couple of chucks on the Waggler, and then we'll pick up the short rig at 5 metres on the pole and see if there's a few fish over that. But I'm also confident as well, a lot of things you can learn from fishing the Waggler like this, there's plenty of fish in the peg and a lot of roach, so I won't have overfed that long line. I think 6 balls is probably about right for it. And hopefully as the day goes on, because we're fishing sort of more afternoon today, hopefully a few more fish will settle on that ground bait line long, possibly a few better fish as well that tend to sort of shut up shop around mid part of the day. But it looks like they might have spooked a little bit off the Waggler there, so I'll just give it one more chuck, see if we can get a bite. Like I say, what I'm not going to do is stop loose feeding. I'm going to keep the loose feed going in there and just see if it's a case that when they fished for the spooking off the rig going in, or the splash of the Waggler, there's a bite in a fish. So what I think we'll probably do is call this the last one on the Waggler. We'll pick up the short pole now and see if we can get a few there. Getting good stamp roach, and if we can catch these at speed short, we should do a really nice weight. Lovely colours on them as well. That one's almost sort of golden. So getting popped in the net. Pop this Waggler rod to one side and we'll pick up the pole now and see if there's a few fish to be caught there. So just get the gear set up around me properly, and we'll pick up the positive rig now and see if there's a couple of fish to be caught quickly on the short line. Again, if it proves that I'm missing bites on this or struggling to catch, I can always go onto that nice sort of light through the water 0.2 rig. But we'll start off with a single red maggot. I don't think we'll need the pinkies today, but you never know, they're always good for tipping sort of a worm hook bait. We'll get this lowered into the peg. Again, with a nice heavy positive rig like this with a pencil style float, I'm not looking to lay it out in front of me. I'm looking to just drop it in and bomb it straight to the bottom. Lift bite and a fish on straight away. Really nice positive bite that, so I might even bring that bulk further down, because that 0.8 bulk didn't even get through that fish. Again, with it being a small fish as well, I'm going straight away switch to fishing a castor. I'll leave a few out as per usual just to darken off. But one thing that can be a problem if you do that and there's a lot of small fish with a castor that's more buoyant, it can be a bit more prone to being nicked by small fish, so occasionally a slightly heavier, lighter castor can work. But it looks like there's a few fish down there, so by tweaking the rigs on this short line, I can try and be a bit more selective. Again, I've mixed up plenty of ground bait today just in case there's lots of fish here, so I can keep topping it up and keep trying to draw bigger fish into the peg. One thing as well that straight away I've decided to do on this short line, little indication there, is I'm not going to loose feed if there's that many small fish there. I think it'll be a waste of time. might be a better idea to just feed nuggets of ground bait, try and get them to follow it down and try and nail a few better fish on the deck. We'll see if we get a bite on the caster. If not, we'll switch between maggot, pinky and caster and just try and work out what the fish want. Again, it might be the fact that I do have to go onto that lighter rig, but ideally if there's lots of those small fish down there, I want to try and get away with fishing a nice heavy positive rig and nailing a bait to the bottom. A little indication there on the caster. There's definitely fish in the peg. Tiny little dink on the float there as well. I've got the floats dotted right down, so any indication like that is probably a line bite. With a tiny little dink on the float. I do think if I fish maggot or pinky down there, there's going to be a lot of small fish. So if I can, I want to get away with fishing a caster. Float's dipping and moving all the time, so there's tons of fish down there. So we'll try, that's a bite and a fish on. Might have foul hooked that one. Yeah, must have foul hooked that. So we'll try a maggot again. Just see if that's what the fish want to take, whether a live maggot just sort of catches their eye a bit more. One thing that I did think about today as well was fishing the bread punch on here, but I'm glad I didn't, because I thought if there's a lot of small fish, you can't really get through them with bread punch unless you fish a piece of flake. So by fishing sort of tougher baits like maggots, casters, pinkies and hemp and stuff like that, you can be a bit more selective, just a bit more durable of a bait as well. So there's a lot of fish in the peg. If there's not many, you can still catch them on pinkies, but if there's a lot of fish in the peg, you can just get through them a bit easier. It definitely doesn't look like the fish have got their heads down and sort of like they're feeding aggressively on this line. Get another little roach this time. Not really what we're after on that line. Again, I might put in another ball of ground bait. Could be for that 45 minutes that those fish have just worked their way through everything that I've fed down there. And that the bigger fish come straight into the ball of ground bait. Again, some places, like I say, the bigger fish will sit off away from the feed initially and then come onto it as they gain confidence. Some other places where they, especially pressured waters, the bigger fish will come straight to the bait and then leave after about sort of 5-10 minutes. They'll just take the odd bit and then move on. It's definitely responding better to live baits rather than casters. They're taking the bait well down as well, so there must be quite a bit of competition. So I'll try and catch one more fish on this. Now we'll look to put in another ball, because I think that could make a big difference to how we're catching. At least with a rig like this as well, with the bulk being only sort of 6 inches above the hook length knot, you know that the fish, or when you do get a bite, the fish are pretty much within a foot of you. A foot of the bottom, so you know that they're feeding somewhere on or near the ground bait. They're not sitting mid-water. Slightly better fish, or not. It's just fighting a bit more, that one. Again, they're clearly taking the bait and coming up in the water, because that's when you don't hook them properly. It's just strange that when I've gone on the caster, I've not had a bite or anything to strike at, so it's a bit strange that, because usually if there's a lot of small fish, they will start attacking the casters. Right, so I'm about sort of 20 minutes in on this short line now at 5 metres, so we're probably coming up to just around the hour mark of the session. And it's interesting because I've had a few bites. It seems like the roach just off bottom, but one thing I've had, or a couple I should say, a gudgeon. And what that tells me, the roach have moved out and the gudgeon have moved in just to graze on whatever's left of the ground bait. So it's as if, like I thought, there's a lot of fish down there, and I think they've pretty much cleared out that area of the peg. I've still been loose feeding long and seen a few more swirls, so I know there's a few fish still on that Waggler line to be caught. But the other thing that this has got me thinking now is that on the long line, that's a biting the fish on again. On the long line, it could be the case that they're starting to clear out the baits. Like I say, another gudgeon. So pretty much on demand that. So that's what we've been catching. I've had 3 of them now. And like I say, that means that that bait on the bottom's been cleared out and the roach have moved away. So I'm going to probably put in another 2 balls and give it possibly 5 minutes before I go on it. Just have one chuck on that long line and see if anything settles. The other thing that I'm going to do now is put even more hemp seed and castor into that mix. Again, the fish are clearly feeding and there's a lot of them down there, so there's no point being shy with the bait. Might as well sort of get plenty in there and try and draw the bigger fish into the peg. Might even put another handful of hemp in there as well. Again, so all I'm doing through the course of this session, as you can see, is making little changes constantly just to see how the fish respond. Again, it's all about making these little changes, covering different options with your feeding and your rigs and stuff like that, just to work out how the fish in that venue respond. I'm saying this is the great thing about fishing these natural venues and club waters. Most commercials you can go to and you pretty much know how it's going to fish. You know, it doesn't take too long in most cases to suss it out. Whereas venues like this, you've got to really think about them, how the fish are feeding, what they feed on naturally, the angling pressure and stuff like that they see. So we'll put another ball in there. Then, like I say, we'll have a look over that long line. At the start I said I'd leave it about 2 hours, but judging by how the fish have responded on the short line to the ground bait, there's only 6 balls in there, so they should be halfway through it, I'd have thought, by now. So that's that short line fed. I'll just wipe my hands off, feed a few maggots long, and then we'll have a go on that 11.5 metre line and see if there's anything down there. Again, being that I've caught on the positive rig short, then I'm going to go straight over the top of that long line on the positive rig and just see how the fish respond to it. So I'll get my other sections on, and I think hook bait wise we'll start off on that with probably double maggot, I reckon, something that's decent bait that we've caught on short with, but just a bit sort of bit bigger, a bit more positive. Again, if I get plagued by lots of small roach and stuff like that, then I can always go to an inert bait like a dead maggot or a castor to replicate what's being fed. Whereas a live maggot or 2 live maggots is more of a standout bait. Same principle, like I said, with that short line, is I'm not going to lay the rig in, I'm going to lower the bulk down as quickly as I can to the bottom and try and avoid all the small fish, really. Just seen a bubble come up right where I've put that rig in. That's a bigger bubble than what's been coming up off the ground bait when it fizzes. So those larger, that's a bite and a better fish on straight away. Feels like a skimmer, this. Just as I was saying that, it is a skimmer. Those bigger bubbles are where fish like bream and stuff are going down and disturbing the silt. Just missed him, lovely colours on him. That's a really nice fish. Hook's just dropped out in the net. You can see loads of marks in him where he's been spawning. You can see the milk out of him there. So get him popped in the net. But at least we know that ground bait line's work for the skimmers and the mix is right. So what I might do, if there's lots of those down there, is double bulk that rig and just fish a bit more positively. That's a cracking result on the first drop in, so I'm going to go straight back on it with exactly the same hook bait and see if they've lined up down there, because if they have, we could soon do a decent weight to those.